Well, I think we're going to begin because it is time, 10:35. I know a few people say they couldn't come and they'll be watching the recording. So if you're watching the recording, you don't know what you're missing, but you get at least a taste
So
of
at least
it.
they can get on the
At least you can
record.
get the recording. And thank you, Phil and Barb, for joining us too.
Morning.
Hi. So this is our last class in this series. Mitch Weiss said he was going to come. I guess he wasn't going to.
He went to Michigan. His
Oh, he
mother
went
is
to Michigan.
visiting
Oh,
from
okay.
California.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, only one page each.
One.
Today is going to be less text, but more in depth. It might be an hour class, not an hour and a half. We'll see. It depends how we're doing. And the first two classes, we were really looking at what was unique about the Jewish spiritual path, and we talked about different practices and different thoughts. There's Mitch. There's Mitch.
Oh.
All right.
Oh, good.
Good. We'll give it. I'll stop my little introduction. Start from rewind.
Oh, is he here?
He's here,
Oh, he
yeah.
didn't go to Michigan.
I just saw him. Hey.
Sorry.
Hi,
hey.
Mitch.
What's going on?
Good to see you. All right.
Good to be seen. Howard?
Hi.
Good to see you. sir. Anyone else? Nice to see you.
There you go, Mitch.
Hello.
I'm Mitch Weiss.
David Fox, nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Bonnie.
We got it. I know
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. All right.
Sorry.
No worries.
Yeah.
It was the perfect time. We were just asking, where's Mitch? He said Michigan.
Yeah,
Then-
well,
then
No.
you said you might.
She
No,
said it.
my-
She started
No,
one
my
time.
mom is here.
She didn't want to
So,
go.
Oh, okay.
no, we're not taking it. So we're just staying here.
Okay.
So, yeah, so thank you.
Good for good to have you. So we'll first few sessions were all about the Jewish spiritual life as individuals and all the different practices. But as Jews, we know we have this unique part of our tradition, which is that we're a collective. We're all together, for good and for worse. Sometimes it's a little bit much. Sometimes it's a wonderful blessing to all be together in our little shtetls and lunch tables and everything we do. So we kind of know how it manifests a sense of Jewish collective physically, right? I remember once when I was running for a plane to go to Israel, and I was wondering which is the plane that goes to Israel. And suddenly I passed a corner, and there was the biggest, most unruly crowd I've ever seen. I said, I'm sure it's this
That's
one.
it.
And there was that one.
That's funny.
And there was one
Well, was
stewardess.
the plane late?
The plane was on time, but there was one stewardess who was saying, line up orderly. And there was
They
just a
don't know
huge
from
mass
that.
of people
Yeah.
all pushing and then creating a huge
We have
mass.
to be
Yeah.
standing in line
Yeah.
at a movie with
Yeah.
a friend of ours who
Yes.
was raised in Israel. It
Yes.
was, I think it was Robert Redford, this baseball movie, but years and years ago. And we're standing. And he said, this would never happen in Israel. There would be a riot.
Never have a line. Well, we have a sense of togetherness, which we know we experience in wonderful ways. You go anywhere around the world, you meet another Jewish person, and you have that connection and that sense
Absolutely.
of brotherhood and sisterhood, and we know how it manifests. It does manifest religiously, just in the nuts and bolts of religious life. The whole concept of minyan, right? So many other places. In my Hindu friends, they have a little shrine in their house, right? They don't have to go to temple, and sometimes they do, but for us, we go to temple. This is go to synagogue. Part of our what it means to be Jewish is to have that. It actually also has a really big spiritual component, and that's something that most people do not think about, and that's what we're going to be thinking about today and talking about. And what does it mean to be spiritually more than just the sum of our parts? Right? More than just the sum of our parts. We're not just spiritually. We're not just a group of people coming and helping each other along around our own individual spiritual lives. But there's something more that's happening. We're more than just, it's not just we're 10 people together and that makes 10 individuals, but there's something more going on. And that's a really important part and then really unique. That we're interconnected and interdependent. And there's something kind of magical thing that happens when we're all together. And it goes back to Sinai, right? Receiving the Torah together. And since then, we've been this group. At Sinai, we were called, we were given a charge to be a holy nation, and a kingdom of priests. So one way that was interpreted afterwards is that we were something called Knesset Israel, which means, right, the Knesset is
That's the government.
that's the government
The
in
Senate,
Israel,
right?
right? It's
Yeah.
right. It means assembly, exactly. Like Beit Knesset is how you say synagogue in Hebrew. So it's the assembly. So Knesset Israel was a name for this kind of collective, the spiritual collective of the Jewish people, and we'll be studying and talking about it today. But the way they saw it is that when we say the Jewish people, we think of, well, there's all the Jews in America, there's all the Jews in Israel, there's all the Jews in all those other little places around the world. Some of us are in danger, and some of us are not, and most of us are a little bit in danger in some ways. We go through stuff. But Knesset Israel was more than that. Knesset Israel was not just us, but all the Jewish souls of all time. And there was like some kind of grouping in the heavens where all the Jewish souls of all times are permanently in connection with us, where we are right now. And we're a whole. And so it's kind of like our ancestor, but it's not just our ancestor. It's not just my Zaidi and my Zaidi's Zaidi. It's also, the great prophetesses and prophets, and they're all up there connected to us.
Is that linked to the idea that we were all at Mount Sinai?
Yeah, that's right. There's this idea that we're all at Mount Sinai, even those of us who were born, now, we're all at Mount Sinai. There's a little corner of our soul that was there.
I'm not sure the prayer, but it might even be Kaddish where it says that we link our bonds.
Right,
Is that right? Is it-
On the bond of life, that
That
thing.
we're all linked
the deep
Bundle
forever or
of life,
something.
isn't it?
bundle of life. We're all bound in the bundle
Something,
of
yeah.
life. Yeah, nice. He said the El Malay Rachamim, all the stuff surrounding death, and you try to think about it, right? Go into the bundle of life, which is it's from the
Here's another
Okay, Joe.
concept that I heard a long time ago, that
yeah.
we're spiritual beings having a human experience,
Yeah,
not
not
human beings having a spiritual
spiritual
experience.
Exactly.
Yes.
What's beautiful about that is that it means that spiritual connection is even more important than a physical connection. And that physical connection that we see a Jewish person, we're like, wow, you're Jewish. It's not just an ethnic thing, right? We tend to think of it as an ethnic thing, but this tells us it's a spiritual thing. That's a deeper connection than, we're sharing a sense of being part of the people, but there's something happening under the surface too. And that's really what's the deep part of that. Right? And we all have those stories, but it's saying there's something behind the scenes happening to our story of when my family moved to France, in the middle of nowhere, France. We thought it was for a year, but it ended up being, for my parents, 30 years. But they had from Jerusalem, but they had people visiting. They once had a friend of theirs visiting who grew up in Brooklyn, and an ultra-Orthodox lady wearing a shiloh and up in the middle of nowhere in France, and gave the wrong flight arrival time, and didn't know what she was doing, and walked into who knows where. And somebody saw her and started speaking Yiddish to her, and she started speaking Yiddish, and he said, "Where are you going?" And she said, "Clara," which was where my parents lived, but he misunderstood, and he spoke French and Yiddish, and took her to some place 2 hours away, the wrong direction, and then eventually 3 hours. And you don't always do that for ethnic reasons. There's something deeper going on too. So this is what we're talking about. We're going to talk about how does that Knesset Israel, this idea that we're part of this communal soul, It's called a group soul. That's actually what it's called in Kabbalah. There's a group Jewish soul. That means that we each have an individual soul, but our individual soul is also all connected as part of a group soul. So then you have people ask, well, what about people who convert to the religion? How does that work? Well, in Kabbalah, they say that the people who are from another religion are actually have a Jewish soul, and then that they're born into another religion, and then there's a little reconnection, and their soul comes from the best part of the group soul, of the Israel soul.
What
I
about
think
people that
that's a
leave
nice
the
story.
religion?
People, there's actually this.
Where do they park their spiritual?
Yeah, where do you park your spiritual part? So there's the truth is that there's actually no way to unbecome being a Jew. So there's at least spiritually, I'm not sure what the Kabbalah says, but from a Jewish law point of view, there's a certain point where you can lose all your rights, but you never lose all your obligations. So you're still losing spiritual money. You're never, even if you become baptized, even if you do this according to Jewish law, you never are not a Jew. You just lose some of your rights.
Do you think this goes back to the fact that we all came from Noah and his kids?
Which parts?
That we're all Jewish.
Yeah.
Everybody should be, because nothing was here but them, and
Well,
everything evolved around that, right?
that's the idea. Okay, from Jew, but he was not Jewish. He was like a proto-Jew. Abraham was the first Jew. Yeah, no,
That's true.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people who have some Jewish descendants in them and sense of spiritual connection. I mean, the way I see people who are not Jewish and who become Jewish is that it could also be that they're bringing where they're come from into the Jewish soul, because the Jewish soul always sometimes needs something new, something that's lacking, right? If it's alive and it's an organism, you always need new things. It's not.
I have clients who tell me they have a Jewish soul.
There you
I
go.
mean, they don't know I'm Jewish, but they tell me they have
Oh,
a
really?
Jewish soul.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, people
So what does that
feel
mean?
a resonance, and I mean, now we're getting a little bit different direction. Judaism believes in reincarnation, right? The Jewish Kabbalah believes in reincarnation. So you could have been Jewish in your previous life, or
Yeah,
who knows,
that's
or
what they say.
maybe you just have. Maybe some people just know their best friend is Jewish, and they experience a lot of religion through that
Kids on the
person.
North Shore, the Gentile kids who grow up with Jews, they feel part of the group.
Barb's husband, right? He was
Yeah.
Barb's husband, Jim. He was super, really connected in that way. And I find this to be one of the most beautiful ideas. We're going to read about Knesset Israel, and this idea of a group Jewish soul, and it's not only something I think it's something that empowers us. I think that's something to start. Something that empowers us as individuals to be connected to our group Jewish soul. So these are two texts we're reading, and there's be a third one from Baal Shem Tov, but these two are from Rabbi Abraham Isaac Cook.
What a name.
What a name,
Poor
right?
guy.
And he was the chief rabbi of Palestine before the creation of the state of Israel, and he was famous for kind of having this idea of loving all Jews. He would go down to the kibbutzniks because he felt even though they were completely secular, they were part of this Jewish group. His son, Rav Kook II, is infamous because his son went on to have Abraham Isaac Kook had many he was very universally minded. He was very much about Jews being special, but he had a very universal side. His son had less of a universal side, and his son is kind of like the father of the spiritual father of the settlement movement, Rav Kook's son. And even then, he also had good sides, and then his teachings got taken different directions. But Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook was a broad thinker, and really a kind of religious genius. He wore one of my favorite. They have a painting of him because he wore a shtreimel. He was a traditional Jew. But in a shtreimel, then there's like all these colors drawn into it because his mind was very colorful and free, even though he came from an ultra-Orthodox world. He was a total Talmud genius and Torah genius, but he also had a very mystical side. And because he's more modern, his language is very poetic, a little bit more relatable. Some of the Hassidic language feels a little archaic, but he's very relatable and beautiful ideas. Someone read for us text number 1.
Looking at me.
No, I'm just looking at you.
Okay.
First
The light, the light of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is Knesset Israel, the ideal of Israel that rests on the whole of the nation, that makes it into one unit in all of its generations. And when this great light is revealed in the land, it manifests in the life of action and of thought, and everything is blessed. And the hidden souls in the supernatural secret place have light and joy. And every living creature ascends. And
So, let's actually parse it because it's very rich. It's very dense, right? So, the light of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, is Knesset Israel, right? So you have a group soul, the ideal of Israel, that rests on the whole of the nation, and then makes into one unit in all of its generations. That means that all the generations are part of it. Right? That's a pretty big idea. So that means that in the soul, there's right now Abraham, like a little shining light, and there's Sarah, and there's Rabbi, and there's 6 million who died in the Holocaust, and there's the souls who were expelled from Spain and all of them. And when this great light is revealed in the land, it manifests in the life of action, of thought, and everything is blessed. What do you make of that? It's kind of like it's something good happens when it's working together.
You can think of it as a group consciousness too. In fact, in Eastern thought, the light, don't talk about the light of the Shekhinah, but they talk about the light of consciousness.
Mhm.
And so all of this consciousness, if you will, or self-consciousness, collectively acting has a huge effect. In fact, a lot of anti-Semitism is in fact based on that principle, that the Jews have this thing that the Nazi philosophers, Giovanni Gentile, was a guy who helped Hitler develop his anti-Semitic thing. And he thought that the Jews were of one mind, one consciousness. And that was very scary for some Germans.
Interesting.
Is it only revealed in Israel?
I think maybe
That's what it
it's
says, right?
revealed in a certain fullness in Israel, but I think it's revealed everywhere because when some people have that Jew radar, right? It's a mystical
Oh,
thing.
yeah. That's true. My granddaughter used to say, "Grandma, how can you tell that person walking the North Dakota is Jewish?" I said,
You
"Trust
just
me,
know.
you know."
Isn't there something like, I can't remember exactly, the 100th monkey? Have you ever heard of that concept? That an idea has to reach a certain amount of people till it actually resonates, and
Mhm.
so that could be part of it too.
Yeah.
All that stuff collecting.
No. So the Baal Shem Tov has this idea of what I call thought forms. So like when you have if you have a thought, let's say the thought is, I really like this person, so to speak, a great person. And I meet Alan and I say, I really like this person. Alan says, well, I like them too. It's kind of like you're strengthening a thought form. It's like creating a kind of, it's mystical. It's like a thought form that's been created and it's strengthened and then becomes a positive thing about this person. Other people can feel it almost. It's like a thing, a gather space, and then also the negative thing. And that's why you have these ideas which are so powerful for humanity, because there's almost like an
Collective
energy,
thought.
collective thought about it. So anti-Semitism is a very negative collective thought that's gathered power over millennia, and it's really hard to diffuse it because people keep feeding it. Well, there's other things, but you feed with people. There's when it's like the opposite, when you say something negative about something and somebody else says a negative thing, and another you can
Grows.
feel it as it grows. You can feel it.
Well, but it's not mystical. For example, there's an old saying that you can have a single person can have a gold coin in his pocket,
Yes.
And multiple people can have the same idea in their head.
Uh-huh.
That's not mystical. I mean, thought in itself is a very strange thing, and it doesn't have a material basis to it, unless you think, unless you get into brain stuff. But from our perspective, thought is something very strange to us. So as we're talking, we're also having the same thoughts.
Thought is governed by vibration, though.
Yeah, that's what, yeah. so
Right, because I recently seen something, it was about the law of attraction, and they were actually saying that the law of attraction is governed by the law of vibration. And everything in the universe has a vibration and frequency,
Yeah,
and when they connect, it's like, your phone has a frequency, mine does too, it's the same thing.
Yeah, but this
Exactly.
vibration and frequency isn't in physics. It's
I think,
it's like
I think it might
that,
be.
but it's not physics.
I think it might, I think, I
It's
think,
gotta
I
be
think it's in
some
the
physics,
physics that's
too.
not,
Not
that's
known yet.
not known yet, but
That's
they'll
okay.
eventually they'll,
Okay.
but I,
okay.
but I.
Because we're all, I mean, even though
We're
we're
all
thought,
vibrating,
we're
yeah.
also vibration,
Yeah.
your body's
Yeah,
vibrating, we
yeah,
have auras,
correct,
all that
correct.
And that's
energy.
like the healing prayer,
Yeah,
the healing
exactly.
circle of prayer. There was
Sure.
a neurosurgeon who wrote an article years ago in Harper's Bazaar about how she had recommended it. And then she had a brain tumor herself and had surgery. And she asked her friends all over the United States, they had this healing circle praying for her. And she actually felt
You
better.
felt it, wow.
There's power in believing in belief.
That's right.
Are
Yeah,
you sending,
definitely.
I mean, people talk about it all, they talk about this concept of vibes. What does vibes actually literally mean? It's, but and so you can send healing vibes, and you also have the vibration of a good thought or a bad thought, which you send, and then you also have the vibration of being Jewish, right? That's what you're picking up, right? Your Judar is the vibration of being Jewish, which is has different aspects. It's not just one Jewish vibration. There's something, and the soul of Israel. When you're connecting to the soul of Israel and you're connecting to that place of the vibration, you're also connecting to something much greater. I think that's part of what this idea is. Okay, so continue and every living creature ascends.
And every living creature ascends, and the world and all that is in it is raised up. The dewdrops hold within them an abundance of blessing. The winds and rain contain within them portions of life and vigor. All life of the spirit, both higher and lower, is refined and is filled with the sense of song and pleasant joyfulness. All is happy, rejoicing, and in gladness, because Knesset Israel has descended to dwell in the land. The eternal national ideal, from the splendor of its divine source that dwells in Israel, that is connected with their sparkling souls, pulses and throbs, and strikes waves in the sea of life. Everything is blessed. Everything is uplifted. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel from now and forevermore. Rejoice in God and be happy, O righteous ones. Be glad, all those who have a true heart.
They're beautiful, right? And
Sure.
very poetic.
Did he experience that? You
I'm
think
sure he did.
These were
I'm sure he did.
these were physical things.
I'm sure
almost that he experienced.
I'm sure he did. I think there were, experiences he had and he interpreted.
Where did he live?
He lived in Israel.
He
So he
did.
was, yeah, I mean, he was born in Eastern Europe. But he came from a big kind of rabbinic dynasty, but he was one of the biggest prodigies of his time, which is why he was made chief rabbi. But there were some people who did not like, some people in his community who didn't like him because he was very open in a certain way. He was very religious, but he was very open.
What century?
20th century, early 20th. So
So
he died
don't-
before the creation.
Don't you feel when you go to Israel a difference
Yeah,
about being Jewish when you're there?
yeah.
I'm so connected. When my wife converted, and when we were, after we did the mikvah stuff, we were driving down Harlem, and literally at Harlem and Lake, I could still, she turned, she says to me, "You think I'm crazy, but I feel different."
That's amazing.
Whoa.
She actually said that,
That's
she
wonderful.
felt
That's
different,
great.
yeah.
Well, when I convert to people, I say to them, I talk about Knesset Israel, I talk about that we're joining this collective. which is a good thing overall, you know,
Right.
that you're part of a very powerful unit. But there's also like a group karma, so to speak. You're also part of a group fate, which has had difficult periods too, right? Which, you know, it used to be when you would tell somebody to convert, you would tell them no 3 times, and then you would say, "Are you sure you want to be joining us? Don't you know what happens to us?" You know?
Yeah, really.
Don't you know it's
You know how
goes
much
on
it's gonna
to-
cost?
yeah, exactly. You know it's gonna happen to us. But we were, you know, now we live in a different. Thank God. There's also an amazing thing about it, and I think he's talking about when everything is good. There's like a sense of like the whole have all of not just us, but all those Jewish souls of all time are kind of pulsating and throbbing and sending blessing to us, and we can feel there's something, you know, an amazing moment. You know, I think. And there's an idea, right? We're talking about Israel, but that there's a heavenly Jerusalem. So part of the soul of Israel is in the heavenly Jerusalem. It's kind of like when there are moments when you're in Israel where suddenly you feel something really special. I think that's when there's like a kind of like an overlap, you know, and there's a sense of you're feeling the heavenly Jerusalem overlap. So I'm actually at some point today I'm going to lead us in a meditation on the soul of Israel. Into it. One of the things that's interesting is also when we're connected with all of that, right? We're connected with all of that greater Israel, those souls, and then what we can accomplish is so much more. I mean, if you look at how much we have been able to accomplish as a people, I think part of it is because of having that vibrational connection to the Jewish people. There's tremendous power we get from it, and being empowered from being that Jewish soul, you know, being part of that greater ideal. And it keeps talking about an ideal. So what's the ideal? Part of our ideal, I think, is going back to Sinai. It's almost like at Sinai, God created this unit, and then all the souls that were born and died since that time, you know, been adding to it and kind of creating a bigger. So there's a way of kind of, and I feel that sometimes when reading the Torah, when you're reading the Torah, you're kind of connecting to that part of the Jewish soul that's in the Torah. You almost pick up their vibe, you know, where they're from, and they were powerful people, you know, leading powerful lives, and you know you can connect all those different parts of the soul and feel their power and our from where we are. It's one of the beautiful parts of being, you know, what a religion is, I think.
Let me ask you one question though.
Yeah.
What does it mean that the Jewish people are one unit? Do the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox feel that way?
They
Yeah.
they very strongly feel that way. Yeah, too
Even
strong.
with the Reformed Jews?
I mean, for them, it's they believe it's all through the mother, right? So
Maybe they believe that they're gonna come back.
no, they believe everybody. They believe you're a wayward Jew, but they believe
That
you're
you're still
Jew.
part of the group.
Yeah, they I mean, look at Chabad, right? Chabad believe this in the strongest terms, which is why they're all out there trying to bring Jews back. Right? They're always trying to.
Yaakov starts recruiting yesterday.
Who is
Yaakov, he was trying to recruit me
Who?
to go to
Yaakov
the Chabad.
Geringer?
Mhm,
You go where?
To the Chabad.
Listen, you should always want to be recruited.
You want to be
Oh, yeah.
recruited?
Anybody that comes to recruit me, I'm for it.
I just. didn't
Because in the
answer him.
process of being recruited, you learn a huge amount.
Yeah, that's
why.
No, well,
Well, I like the Chabad, but I'd rather come to Friday, Saturday to our synagogue service. Not the-
well, Chabad, they have a strong. There's two sides to this, and this is one of the reasons I picked Rav Cook and not other places. But once you start talking about how amazing the Jewish soul is and how empowering it is, the danger is to start to think you're better. You know,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's
it,
not
yeah,
that's not where you
that's
don't want
the
to go, and
danger,
that's
right,
that's
yes,
part of
yeah.
not saying every Chabad is like that, but it's a part of Chabad theology, and it manifests. And maybe, probably, I'm sure a lot of Chabad don't believe that, but it's embedded in some parts of that world and other Hassidic theology. I mean, it's embedded in other parts of the Jewish world too. But there is a sense of the Jewish soul and group soul being above and better. And Rav Kook has a universal side, and I don't like. That's not a good thought to have. You know, you can be power, and every other people can be powerful in their way too, and you can draw power from your group soul. And there's something special about our Jewish soul and how old and ancient and everything it's accomplished, despite how small we are. all those things, and
But
but you don't have to go there.
The
Yeah.
German philosophers, especially
Yeah.
Nietzsche, for
Yeah.
example, points out that there are two real cultures in the world. One is the French and the
Yeah.
other is the Jews.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and because of his sense and other people's sense of the Jews being a real culture, it scared people. It scared people because of a real culture is exactly what we're talking about. A real culture pulls people together. Individuals and the group become merged,
Yeah.
and they have lots of power. And people get scared of this power.
They feel
So-
left out, right?
Well, they feel left out, they feel envious, they feel threatened because this group is more powerful than what they think their individual is or what they think. their
Then they
group is.
assume these other bad things about that they're.
Sure,
competitive.
sure, they're gonna be manipulated, all kinds of stuff.
Or you see it manifesting these last few weeks. It's this guy Kanye West and his
Oh,
his
lunatic,
insanity is,
lunatic.
but it's still this idea. But
There's a missing link between the brain and the mouth and people like that.
Rabbi, could I share a couple things?
yeah, go for
Sure,
it, please,
Barb.
Barb. Great to have
Okay,
you with
so one, you guys talk about the Chabad thing, but I remember years and years ago, I think it was Norma who said, we need to be welcoming. And I think that's when we actually started having greeters. And for a while, board members were greeters. And I know now we have Suzanne Fournier as a greeter. But the fact that we do welcome,
Exactly.
people, strangers into our community is really valuable and really important. And then the second thing I was going to say is just this morning on Meet the Press, they were actually saying that Trump's tying himself to these anti-Semitic people like Kanye and that other fellow that he had for dinner is actually hurting him more. Because even though there's his, MAGA base that might be anti-Semitic and racist, that a lot of the hardcore Republicans don't want to be tied to those anti-Semitic people. And so it's actually more challenging for him. And then the final thing I wanted to say is that, my husband, Mitch was talking about his wife and
We
saying
talked- I talked about you. We talked about your husband when you were on the phone.
Okay, thank you. So and that was actually me making family plans for Hanukkah. But anyway, he grew up in East Rogers Park, which is a very heavily Jewish community. And so he made a lot of lifelong friends who are still some of his best friends to this day. And so he felt that pull, that spiritual connection, even then, before he even met me, before he anticipated converting. But he had already had that feeling of connection to the Jewish people. And I think, his sister also converted and married a Jewish man, and they live in Buffalo Grove. So it is a real palpable feeling, that spiritual connection. It's palpable.
It's amazing. Yeah, that's exactly. I didn't know the part about his sister, but I was
Yeah.
talking about Jim because I knew of how strong, growing up and feeling that sense of and the first. I mean, I don't want to be down on Chabad or anybody because
No, I know.
they also can be very welcoming. But there is a part of, I guess the only reason I was saying is there is a part of this idea, which I believe in 100% of this idea of connecting to the Jewish collective, where you don't want it to turn into a thing of negative. You want to see the source of blessing for everybody, not as a source.
Or a cult. We don't want to be a cult.
Yeah.
And we were also talking about our trip to.
Thank you, Barb, for remembering that I started that greeters program.
I do, absolutely. And then the final thing I was going to say is thank you, Rabbi, and Norma and Howard, who were there too. But the temple trip to Israel was amazing. And I was just talking to some family members about that trip and how absolutely we felt that spiritual pull in many, many places in Israel. And it was just incredible. So thank you again for doing that for us.
Well, you
We
went,
went, we went with the temple across the street when they went, and yeah, it was life changing for me. You know, it was at a time in my life when I needed to do that. And we took the kids, they were little, but still. I don't know if they were, I think they were bar mitzvah already, but there was definitely a connection being there and just, sense of belonging.
So you're connecting, you're feeling, I mean, I think you're feeling the land and the soul and the Jewish people, and you're feeling on an ethnic level, you're feeling on a spiritual level, you're feeling, I mean, whenever my wife goes to Israel, she says, everybody looks like me. And she loves it. I mean,
Well, that's why I like the
Yeah.
south of Spain,
Yeah,
actually, that
yeah.
everybody looks like me.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. But it's more than that, right? Kind of happening on every level. So let's go on to the next text. We're I think it's take it even further. This is another Rav Cook text. Who would like to read this one?
I'll read it. When a person invests his heart and mind to bind himself to the divine light that shines within the collective soul of Israel, in all the souls and all the generations from the first until the last, he is thereby binding himself to the divine light that rests upon the full stature of the collective soul of humanity, of which the soul of Israel is the essence and center. And through this act of spiritual connection, he also binds himself to the universal divine light that is revealed in all of creation, that reflects the very essence of the supernatural aspect of the human soul. And then, as a matter of course, his consciousness joins to the supernal divinity that is above all of creation, and his soul becomes filled with holiness, great beauty, and power. And through the addition of his own power and energies, he adds to the collective power of Knesset Israel, the soul of Israel, because he is a part of it, and therefore he also adds to the energy and power of the whole of humanity and all the worlds, as it states in Psalm 68, verse 3-5-6. Ascribe your strength unto God. His majesty is over Israel, and his strength is in the heavens. God is awesome out of your holy places. To God of Israel, he gives strength and power unto the people. Blessed be God.
I was just gonna say, that last statement that he gives strength and power to the people. It's not necessarily the Jewish people, just to all
humanity.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I love about this text. I mean,
Right.
he's saying that the Jewish soul is also our connection into the greater humanity, right? So it's sometimes people feel like you have to choose between being connected to Jewish people and the rest of humanity, but your Jewish soul is the gateway to the rest of to the highest. So in some ways, to connect to the highest part of your humanity, your gateway is through your Judaism, which is a beautiful idea. That way, it's not coming through you're not exclusive. But this is the way you connect to your deepest humanity, is by connecting first to your Jewish soul. Through your Jewish soul, you connect to that place of the most human belonging, the highest human belonging.
it's interesting how they keep saying the divine light. I mean, people that see the light when they're crossing over and things like that. So to use that term light.
Yeah,
That's
the light
but-
thing isn't only Jewish, of course. You know,
Right,
the
yeah,
light thing is
I'm just
also-
saying,
yeah,
that people talk about
Well,
that.
light is somehow our, we're, however you want to look at us, but we're physical beings. We're evolved from monkeys, right? We have these physical bodies.
Maybe you, I don't know. I don't know.
But whatever it is, whoever our physical bodies experience spirituality partly by experiencing life. That's just the way we do it. So I don't know. It's something to do with the way our bodies and minds and
Yeah,
spirit.
but they're talking about light that isn't experienced
I know, but it's
Light
just-
is the vibration of our body. Light is ultimately the result of vibration,
Well, the
creating
light
that
of
frequency probably. And I know, like in my profession, I'm a chiropractor, we use the word subluxation. And if you break down that word, sub means below. I think we've talked about this.
Yes.
Lux is a measurement of light, and ation is a condition. So when we see patients and they're subluxated, there is literally less life in their body. because that expression is less. And on a philosophical note, because my profession is philosophy, art, and science, but the philosophy behind it is that you need that expression of life in order to live. So when there's less life in your body, literally there's less expression of it, and the quality of life is less. So when we as chiropractors put our hands on people and allow that, if you will, from a spiritual standpoint or even a philosophical, for that energy to get to the body, that's how the body heals, not through drugs or medicine and those kind of things. So it's interesting when I look at that, lux is in there, that measurement of light.
So you're sharing your energy with the person that you're.
Well,
working on.
I mean, there's something to be said with us putting our, I mean, even the
Oh,
Bible
hands
talks about the
on
laying
stuff.
on of hands. I mean,
Right.
who knows? You know what I mean? But miracles happen when chiropractors put their hands on people, because we're literally allowing the intelligence of the brain to get to every tissue cell in that body and back and forth. And that's how your body works, is through that communication. So when it's obstructed, the body can't work the way it could or should. It ends up building itself sick over time. So to reverse that, just, you know, it just takes
Well,
time.
depression too is
Ah.
actually the absence of this kind of light. But the light, I think Jews have a lot of this light, so to speak, because they're into study. And study does something. It creates a self-consciousness. It creates, as you study a lot, you become aware of you, the studier. Okay, so you have a self-referential cycle between the stuff you're studying and you, the studier. Because of this self-referential cycle, you can feel
I mean,
this light of consciousness.
I think the light, in my mind, the light can come through studying, but also only if you're studying from a spiritual point of view, because
Oh, yeah.
the light-
yeah.
but we say, you can say some people have a lot of light in their face. What does that mean? I mean, you see some of the great painters would convey it beautifully well, also that light. But I think that light is what we've been talking about in all the other sessions. When you work on your spiritual self, then your own light is increasing, because you're working on removing the barriers between you and your soul is coming more connected to your soul, and that's creating a greater experience of light going out and giving it to other people. But
Well, you can also get this light from working on things in mathematics, for example, because what happens is you get to the edge of rationality. You get to the edge of the squareness of yourself, okay, of the squareness. And as you get to the edge of rationality, you find light that comes in, because you find something that's unknown, you find something that cannot be mapped into the rational structure. So, you know, that's part of, you know, say great mathematicians, they're always on the edge of this, and they feel
artists
that
and
too.
mathematicians and
Artists, same thing.
scientists or
Sure,
poets or
sure.
anybody who's, when you're arriving to a place where you're arriving to a place where the physical is coming to
a stop.
a stop, right?
Or
Right,
rationality.
Rationality, and you're going
Rationality is
beyond the
kind of
rationality,
right,
you're coming.
right.
But there's and I guess what I call the spiritual path is a sustained means of trying to do
Right,
that. So you're
that's
not
very
just
good.
coming to it by accident, but you're trying to create a sustained means of accessing that and bringing more of it into it.
I met a man once in my practice as a psychiatrist who told me that he could achieve this through studying philosophy. He was a brilliant, but it was only in a flash. It would
Yeah.
only come from time to time. And what happened to him, he ended up introducing him to somebody. Anyway, he ended up leaving his wife, marrying somebody, and becoming an Orthodox Jew. And through that process, actually, he was able to maintain this experience of inner
Well,
illumination.
religion is the whole of religion is basically designed for it.
Sure.
That's what religion is. Religion is designed to take those experiences and make it. You say 100 blessings a day. Every time you say a blessing, it's to reconnect to it, and to never let it go, and to expand it. It doesn't always work. There's a lot of people who do it by rote, and it works a tiny bit. Because it's not useless, but
While you're doing the blessing, I think what you have to do is you have to be self-conscious about doing the blessing.
you have to be aware.
You have to be aware.
And connect.
There's a blessing I believe you give to everybody when we leave temple, that
Yeah,
Hashem should shine his light upon your face.
Yeah,
That might be the-
Hashem should. The that God should shine his face
Right.
upon you.
Right,
Yeah, it's just-
right.
That's a 3,500-year-old blessing.
So I'm
That's a very
saying,
old
tying
thing.
with the light, again, the light.
Yeah, well, there's beautiful images in Kabbalah. It's like the face of God shining down with the heavens, and people are like, and this is part of it, because when we have the ability, it's not just by ourselves, but we can draw on that power of all of Israel to feel all the light of Israel also with us. And that's what this is about. You're not just feeling your own light, but you can connect and feel the light of all of Israel come through you by connecting to it. That's what this
I
is
I have a picture of a guy studying the Torah,
about.
and his head is bowed like this, and there's light and coming from his back, illuminating the Torah. And it's just sort of a
Yeah,
beautiful,
beautiful.
beautiful
Yeah,
picture.
that's a beautiful
Well, doesn't Jesus have that also?
Oh, yeah,
Well,
yeah,
the-
every-
well, and then-
all
and the East-
the
all
real
his
guys,
pictures
all
have
the
the
real
East too.
guys.
paint.
In the
Sure.
East too, in the
Jesus.
East too, all the
Yeah,
Hindus
yeah,
and the
sure.
Buddhists have a
Right.
halo around their
Yeah.
heads.
Yeah,
That's
and
conveying.
it's light supposedly that comes from behind.
Right.
And, and there's lots of stuff in the Torah about where this light comes
Well,
from. For example, Moses,
Uh-huh.
when he asked God to show him his face, he said, no, I won't show you my face. And Moses backs into a cleft in the rock
Mhm.
and feels the
The
forward,
force.
the forward force of this stuff which emanates the world. I mean, it's a
But
beautiful,
then what
beautiful
happens right afterwards? Moses walks down the mountain, and the people say to him, "Your face is shining too much." And they make Moses
Yeah.
wear a veil over his face.
Yeah.
It says that in the Torah. So for the
Oh,
rest,
my.
the
Sure,
whole rest of
sure.
Moses's life, unless
Yeah.
when he's talking to God, he wears a
He
veil
has to
over his
wear a
face.
veil?
Really?
Because they
his
don't want
face-
to see
His
that.
face is shining too much, and it scares it.
Yeah, it
the
scares
people.
people. It scares
Really?
That's how
That-
bad.
that-
That's how much
that's
his
why
face
some
is.
people put
That's
makeup
because
on
after
their
that,
face.
it's right after that moment. So it's.
Well, I would assume he had a lot of faith after
Well,
that connection
it's-
with.
Yeah, it's
Exactly.
right in his face. So people were like, "It's too
Wow.
much for me." But,
No,
I never knew that.
Jesus says something about hiding your light under the bushel, doesn't he? Yeah, hiding your light under a bushel.
May I ask a question?
go for it.
Oh, thank you. And this question is inspired in a way by David's observation that the group soul is a potentially very dangerous idea and that it's been used in various ways, as he pointed to some political examples. But it's more specific a question. Can you see any tension, Rabbi? Do you see any tension between this idea of a Jewish group soul, which I think of it as a coming out of a Platonic tradition, but put that aside, I think it really does, a Neoplatonic tradition of a group soul. Do you see any contradiction between that and the idea that I learned actually from you in Leil Shavuot one time of the Bratslaver, Nachman of Bratslav, idea that each person in a way comes to Sinai and has his or her own revelation, own particular take, which seems highly open to an individualistic and even an interpretation and a way of appreciating dissenting views and different views. Do you see any problem with that in relation to the group soul, which sounds to me kind of scarily homogeneous and uniform? That's the
I mean,
question.
the way I would put it, first of all, we believe in 5 different levels to your soul, right? So there's different parts of and essentially our journey is individual, but we have 5 levels of our soul. So there's parts of our soul that are connected, according to Kabbalah, to that group ideal, and then there's parts of our soul that are highly individualized. And then I also think that our experience of life is so individual and so one of separateness, essentially, of aloneness, that I think it's nice to have that sense of group soul. And I think this idea of group soul, even though it might sound like it's one whole, but there's many different parts of that group soul. And the group soul are the parts of the group soul that are from the Babel, you could say, if you wanted to, we're playing with an idea, but we're Babylonian or from the Sephardic, there's so many different parts of the Jewish group soul and so many different poles and so many different parts to it, that I think it's an empowering idea. There's not just it's not just one part of it. I mean, there's maybe one general ideal going back to Sinai, but I think the idea that we each interpret Sinai individually is still very much valid. But go ahead.
Do you know in Buddhism, for example, there are two strains of thought. There's the big spaceship and the little spaceship. The big spaceship is that we can only go to nirvana when we go together. So we can only get to the light, we can only get to the center of the divinity unless we go together. And the little spaceship is we all go alone. But these two things seem to be very different from each other, but they're really
They
not.
coexist.
They're really
Yeah.
not. They're the same, they're the
That-
same thing.
That's what I was saying. The
Exactly,
different levels of the
collectively
soul.
and all together.
That's what I was saying about
Yeah,
the different
right,
levels of the
right,
soul.
right.
There's a part, according to Judaism, we have 5 different levels to our soul. And there's parts of us that are experiencing it individually and go through an individual journey of gathering wisdom, of understanding, of interpreting tradition, of interpreting what came about. But then there's parts of us that just belong to a much greater part. I mean, you could say we talk about our human soul, and there's a part of us, the chaya, at the highest level of the soul, which is the same soul we share with all of humanity. So that could also sound scarily, the same. We all have the same human soul. Oh, how could I?
Right.
But we believe it's actually a beautiful idea because it means that we're connected to other people. We're not just all alone. So I actually think it's a beautiful, the highest level, we're all human, but there's part of us is connected Jewishly to all other Jewish
You
souls.
still see the picture
And,
you drew and gave us in the last class you taught of the different aspects of the soul.
Yeah.
Remember that
Oh, yeah.
picture?
So the difference, yeah. So I really, they all coexist and they add to the richness of human experience. And I think they talk to different aspects of our experience. And I think the soul of Israel is overall just a very empowering, beautiful idea. And it's empowering to us. It means that we're connecting other Jews. But you're right. I do think that if it's taken as an exclusive, superior way, then I think it can be a negative. But that's the same with every idea.
Do you think you keep saying the soul of Israel goes back to me what Alan said because of Sinai?
Yeah, it all goes back to Sinai because at Sinai we were bound. The Jewish, this is Kabbalah, right? There's an idea that at Sinai, it's almost like in the heavens, an energetic center was created to correspond to what happened down here. It was filled with a certain ideal, which is a mission to be a light unto the nations, which is not an exclusionary idea, which is a very inclusive idea, right? We're trying to bring light to the nations and to be a king of priests. And then that was just fed through all the millennia. And we're hooked into that power and we're working towards it, each in our own little way, even if we don't know it, to try and make this world. What's the end goal of what happened at Sinai? It's what Isaiah describes: a world of peace and a world of the lion and the lamb and all that stuff. So, yeah. So we're working. We're forced trying to bring that. We're not just doing that all alone, but we're doing it as a collective. And but I think what happens is that when we interpret such an idea in too concrete a way, you do get into trouble, as in it makes it being about it if it becomes theology rather than a spiritual idea, which is not theology. Theology is exclusionary because they say if you believe this and then you don't believe that, and so in general religion gets into problems when it becomes too concrete, and then it's become ideas that were meant to be expansive become instead smaller. So let's move on to the last text. I do want to try and lead us in a little meditation. This is the Baal Shem Tov. And one of the things that, if you notice in the last text, he talks about binding yourself. You can bind yourself to the soul of Israel. It's not just something that you can bind yourself to that idea. Okay,
How do you do that?
so we'll get to it.
Is there kind of a glue you can buy in the
Yes,
synagogue
yes, there
store?
is.
Prayer is probably the glue
Jewish
that keeps
glue.
it all together, right?
I'll tell you about this. We're going to do it in meditation, but let's read too. He talks about it. Baal Shem Tov. Who wants to read it?
I can read.
Go ahead.
The Torah teaches that in all of the service of the Holy One and in the doing of mitzvot, whether it is in shofar, sukkah, Pesach, tefillin, there is a great need for every Jew, because with every deed we create a garment in the lower Garden of Eden, and with every intention we create a garment in the upper Garden of Eden. To include himself or herself in the intention, in prayer, or blessing before eating during the week, or all the more so during the meals of Shabbat, and to include in his intention all of the Jewish people. This is why the Rabbi Isaac Luria established the prayer, "You should love your neighbor as yourself," at the beginning of our morning prayers, to connect himself to all of the others who unify the upward calling.
So to begin right at the beginning of the prayer, you say you should love your neighbor as yourself. And he's saying, why was that instituted by Rabbi Isaac Luria, who's a mystical? He's saying because you're trying to, it's an intention. You bring an intention. You can say before everything you do some people will say this, I do this mitzvah and will do it to include myself and include all the Jewish people. You're kind of drawing down the power of all the Jewish people while you're saying it.
What's the notion of garment?
So the garment is really a wonderful idea, but it's that we all have a garment that's called a chalukah de Rabbanan. It's
Is that the same as the noga that
It's-
people talk about? Different.
It's a little bit different. The way the Kabbalistic version is we all have what's called a Rabbi's Coat. And that means it's kind of like an aura. We each have a coat that surrounds us. And this coat is made up of all of our deeds. And so all the good things you do make your coat shine ever brighter and more beautiful. And not just your deeds, but your intentions, your thoughts. And all the bad things you do make it look more and more dirty and like it needs to go to the dry cleaners kind of thing. And you can go around your life and everybody might think you're the most wonderful person, but your coat does not lie, because it's really what's happening, right? It's your real thing. It's not how you appear to the world. And when you die, you go to where your resonance of your coat is. But your coat has a resonance to it, and that draws you when you die to the appropriate world. It's a beautiful Kabbalistic idea. It's almost like a radio frequency.
Your karma is embedded in your clothing.
It's the result. It's the result of all of the karma that you've worked out and everything you've done, and it's vibrating a certain frequency, and then you just automatically go to that world when you die. So it's like, but you have grace, because when you die, you get taken up to heaven, and God looks at your coat, and the angels examine your coat, and you have one more year. That's why you say Kaddish, where through your prayers you can do a little extra work to work through some of the kinks in your coat. Yeah, to have a little cleaning to your coat and a little brushing here and there, and then
Is that why there's a year of mourning?
that's why the year of mourning, so that because there are people are praying for you to help work through so that your coat that's a Kabbalistic.
Where did this come from? Did this come from an individual?
So it actually comes from a prophecy, the prophecy of Zechariah. It's the same prophecy where we have the words, not by my might, nor by my power, but by my spirit says. So at the beginning of that, God looks at the high priest, and the angels come and remove his coat, his filthy coat, and put a new coat on him. And so it's the idea that we have we have this coat that surrounds us, which is really made up of. So
So the dedication of the stone would be like, that's the end of it. You had a year to get them within me, and now this is official.
So at that point, at least the traditional idea is then you kind of go to where you have that year where you're churning a little bit and working through more stuff, and then after a year, that in between period ends, and then you kind of go to your resting place, and according to Kabbalah, then eventually you have another rebirth, unless you don't need to anymore. But then you go to so it's the coat the year period is an extended grace where you have, more time to work on your.
There's another piece to this that's interesting, which I've often felt that somehow being human, having a human body, allows you to work on this thing.
Yeah,
So
for
that
sure.
if you think of the birth, you're reborn into a new human body, and because the human body is made out of matter, in fact, it's the most dense thing that you're ever going to be in contact with. Given the spot that you might have been up there, you can actually push against it,
Yeah.
and
It's
there's-
friction.
and you
friction.
can improve your station in the order of things. Now, I've never had that experience, I have to say, so this is pure speculation, but it's an interesting thing.
Well, there is an idea that it's right in Kabbalah, the human beings are considered above angels because we have the ability to grow because of the friction between our souls and our physical cells. So that the friction between the two allow us to grow. We're called the walkers. We're able to walk, while angels are called the stand, those who stand. Angels don't grow. They're just divine beings. And so when you go up on your tippy toes in the prayer,
They're floaters.
they're floaters. So your legs are supposed to be together because their legs are like stuck together. They can't walk.
That's what we say. There's only, well.
It's like a horror movie.
No, but there's a saying that there's only standing in the afterlife. and There's only,
That
there's
sounds
no
awful,
sitting.
but that-
Oh, you wouldn't like that.
Standing room only, is it?
Standing room only, yeah, really, that's funny.
Yeah.
What
But
is the
yeah.
significance of the upper and lower
Yeah, garden.
Garden of Eden?
Well, I think what it's saying is that what he's saying is your intention, which is the intention before your deed, creates an even more important garment, maybe. I don't know. So that it's kind of like when you have an intention within your heart, a true intention, not a fake intention, but true intention, that intention is very powerful. And you can do a deed. I mean, deeds are obviously what change our physical world, but there's some people who will do a deed, they'll give, even money or food to somebody, but in their mind is thinking, ugh, this guy, this schlepper, I'm giving them food. And it's saying, okay, so you might be getting a little bit of a good garment for doing the deed, but your intention is horrible, and so you're not getting a good garment for that. So, the intention in traditional Jewish law, intention is they talk about a lot. How can you legislate intention? Because you can't examine another person's heart. So they say you can't really most of the time. But in Jewish spirituality, Jewish mysticism, intentionality is very important. And, it's like what you think in your heart, that's what's important. What you do is important too, obviously, as bringing out into the world is a kind of a sense. Something begins with a thought and begins with an intention and becomes a fully formed thought, then it can become a word and a deed, more and more concrete. And the more concrete it is, the harder it is to take it back to. But when you do, basically a lot of it is God can see into your heart, and most of us can only see a person's deeds, but what's in your heart is very important. And that's,
When I have a new client, I have them draw a picture on one side of the paper,
yeah,
what they look like on the outside, all the aspects of them, and then on the
Wow.
other side, what's actually inside. So I learn a lot about the person.
yeah, that's super
And then
interesting.
try to get them to connect those parts
Yeah.
because they're very different.
That's really interesting. Very good. Very. That's awesome. Well, I think maybe we'll end with a little bit of meditation. We do a little meditation on the soul of Israel. So ask everybody to find a comfortable position from which you don't have to move too much. And then you can put your hands on your lap, or you can put them together, or just on each leg, however works better for you. Just settle into your seat, or your feet on the ground, and take a deep breath, letting go of any anxiety or tension you still have, and just relax and kind of quiet down the body, the feet and legs, and midsection area, fingers, and hands and arms, the lower back and upper back, shoulders, neck, even the facial muscles. We begin to become aware of the movement of our breath. Inhale, exhale. For this moment, letting go of all the thoughts, and all the stories in our minds, putting all of our thoughts in that breath. Everything else just fading into the background. As the breath becomes as a door that's opening and closing, opening and closing. Imagine that that door changes from being a door into the Hebrew letter A. Letter A, sound of the breath, connected to the divine coming into our bodies, going back out into the great universe, coming into our bodies, out into the great universe. Then we can imagine above our heads, very big nighttime sky, as expansive as you can make it, filled with millions of dots of light. Imagine that great expanse, light after light after light after light, in that huge open sky. Every one of those dots of light is a soul in Knesset Israel, the soul of Israel. All of it is filled with the power of the soul, all different parts. And all the way back, souls of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. The souls of Yosef and his brothers. Souls of all those who went down to Egypt and all those who were enslaved, all those hundreds of years, all the suffering that they underwent. All the souls who experienced the great redemption among the miracles, Moses, and Miriam, and Aaron, those who left with them, walked onto Sinai on the mountain and heard the divine voice speaking to them across the chasm. All those who walked to the promised land, those who enter the land, and all the judges and prophets and prophetesses, Elijah and Samuel, Deborah, all the guides and mystics and seers, King Solomon who built the temple, all those who sat in the temple and experienced the great radiance of the Shekhinah, and all the millions who walked into the temple and felt the blessing of the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, and Yom Kippur. And all those who witnessed the destruction, the long years of exile, all those who came down to shepherd them and comfort them and console them and guide them, all the servants of humanity, the thinkers and artists, the rabbis and sages, culminating in the 6 million of the Shoah, all those who died in the Shoah, and the great light in the soul that they represent, bridging heaven and earth. All those who died reconnecting to the land of Israel, all those who are yet to come. Imagine that you have your own soul, one light among all of them, that emerges with all the others into one great big whole, powered with great soul stretching through all worlds and all heavens. And imagine that all of us are turning together. The name Yud Hey Vav Hey appears before us. We turn to the name, all the yearning and devotion of the soul of Israel, to make a prayer for the Jewish people, for the world, for ourselves. The divine knowledge flowing through the letters, through the soul and into the world. Clear our minds of all images. We connect with the movement of the breath. We sit quietly in the stillness for a few more seconds. When we're ready, we can open our eyes. Just a short version of the meditation. It's actually good to do it with a part of a longer meditation, but it's something one can do is take a few minutes and try and connect all the parts of connecting to the Jewish soul. Sense of the beauty and power of the soul. So thank you everyone
Thank
for
you.
joining us
Thank
today.
you.
Yeah, very
Nice trip.